Federal prosecutors said Monday they will not pursue charges against the production crew of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, 9 of whom were arrested last month and charged with misdemeanor unlawful entry at the U.S. Capitol. In a statement, the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. said the 9 members of the show had been invited by congressional staffers into the House office building and that an escort left them unattended. Quote, "We do not believe it is probable that the office would be able to obtain it and sustain convictions on these charges."
So Tucker Carlson discussed the dismissal of charges on Fox. Let's watch.
These insurrectionists went to the January 6th committee hearing. They were prohibited from being there because they had already been denied special press credentials. Of course, they're not media. They're not entertainers, Tucker. They are Democrat Party activists.
That's correct.
They are no different than any of the people who were there on January 6th. I mean, Stephen Colbert is a Democrat Party loyalist. He spends his entire show beating up on Trump and Republicans. So they were there as activists. So they could have actually shut down this committee. And so think about that. Think of the horde. Think of Liz Cheney's face if the puppet dog guy caused her committee to pause.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, it does not sound, they're trying to, liken it to January 6th. I guess fair enough. And it was wrong, obviously, for them to be in the wrong place or whatever, but it doesn't really sound like a very similar situation, right? They were let in, I guess, by some member of Congress, and then you're supposed to be supervised at all times by that person, and I guess they weren't. It doesn't sound to me like they did anything remotely serious enough to be charged with an actual crime. I mean, they shouldn't have done that. And I guess, given how much grandstanding and standing on ceremony that liberals are doing about, what happened to the Capitol and people going into the Capitol on January 6th without permission, I guess fair enough. But it just doesn't sound that similar to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think people are latching onto it. It feels hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
To say, well, so when liberals do it or people that are representing a liberal-leaning show, then it's fine. But then when these other people who were just walking into the building and they were just kind of looking around and gawking, and I mean, if a tour guide would have walked up to some of these people and said, "Would you like a tour?" A bunch of them would have said, "Sure, actually, I would love a tour." So I think that then people are looking at this and saying, why is there this hypocrisy? But in reality, I do have to say, though, I do believe that many people have been charged with crimes from January 6th that should not be. A lot of the people that are being even convicted, their sentences, I think, are absolutely, it's way too harsh. People are being held for, however long right now at this point without going through actual trials and whatnot. And so, though I do agree that there is some wrong happening when it comes to January 6th, I will say that of the hundreds of people that were in the Capitol building, they did not charge the vast majority of them. So it would be one thing, I would say, if they went after all the people. I think they estimated
literally
that
everyone who
people,
was in there. Yeah.
Right. I think they estimated 800 people ended up in the Capitol building. And I believe of the 800, 200 were charged. That's because they were trying to get certain groups, certain people for certain things. But, some of those certain things, I would argue it's, why is the government going after somebody who's, gawking around and not really doing anything damaging? And so there's definitely questions about that. And I'm not dismissing that. I do think that there is something that needs to be looked into that. But most of the people were not charged just for entering the Capitol. Most people were let go.
Right, I feel that way too. And even people who are pretty guilty and did bad stuff, do they need to spend months and months in solitary confinement or whatever the horrible conditions were, which is just common really for all crimes. We're too much of a prison-based society. We're too militant about charging things just in general, not even for this specifically. So I would say that about any number of people facing very serious or really awful prison terms. But yeah, no member of the Colbert team nobody smashed a window or urinated on somebody's rug or, did any of that. That stuff is, that's a more serious. Yeah, not saying that means jail for the rest of your life or solitary confinement, but yeah, you should, if you smashed windows, if you fought with the police, you took knocked things over or more than knocked things over, or urinated or defecated, then yeah, you're probably going to get charged with something, and I'm not going to lose much sleep over being charged for that, and nobody.
Yes, just
it's not
level,
an equivalent thing.
And what length, right? Like what level of charges are they getting for doing certain things? What length of time are they being sentenced with? That is something that I think people should be paying more attention to and spending more time on, because there are some discrepancies there. And when you look at and it's the reason why there's discrepancies is because they're labeling it as an insurrection. They're saying, no, but this was worse. What you did was worse than the people that did things, let's say, during the protests of 2020, the BLM protests, where there were some rioters that then went around and did very similar things, if not worse in some cases. What sentences did those people get in comparison to the people that went into the Capitol building on January 6th? And there was this attitude in the country, or at least amongst some, that, well, it's different because these people had a different intention. I don't agree with that the vast majority had that intention at all. That's where, so that I think needs to be looked into more. And of course, mainstream liberal media is not going to look at that at all. Right. I do think that Fox News outlets, conservative outlets, are maybe, of course, they're capitalizing on this, on the Colbert people being let go, and they're using that as a moment to shine the light on the hypocrisy. But I do think they could spend more time shining the light on what kind of charges were these people given, charged with, and what kinds of punishments are they getting, what kind of conditions are they currently being held in. And I know some of them are talking about that, but certainly we need to be holding our government accountable.
It just wasn't, they wanted to make it sound like it was, they being, the committee, the prosecutors, the mainstream media, the liberals, they wanted to make it sound like it was organized. Because if it was organized, well, who organized it? Is it Trump people? Can we connect it to Trump? And it was, I was there. I covered it in person. I watched them go in. Again, I think it was a absolutely horrible thing that happened. Very akin to a lot. I also covered a lot of the violence during the post George Floyd riots. That was bad. This was also very bad. This was clearly not organized. It was like the furthest thing from organized I've ever witnessed. It was absolutely a spontaneous mob kind of riot. Over the crowd went wild, like a concert or something. I mean, very much like a concert type thing, because Donald Trump, the performer, had just performed for them. And I think it's fine to hold him, morally responsible for that. But it was not planned. They did it. And there's an appropriate number of consequences. It's different from other things in that it happened to a very prominent government building that has tremendous, symbolism for the country. So it has significance in that regard, but it just wasn't. You couldn't convince me based on what I saw and based on what we've heard that it was organized. It got out of hand. They did some bad things, and they should be, held accountable to the appropriate degree, as should people who burned cities and did other things. So that's just
and that's been my big issue with it, is that it's held for some reason at a higher level than somebody's business that they built for their entire life. They spend all their money and all their blood, sweat, and tears building a business. It gets burnt down, looted, and it's like, oh, okay, well, sorry that happened. And then the government building gets swarmed, and then they act like it's something completely different. I would like to see the people that work inside that building have a little bit more respect for the building and for what it represents, and I don't feel like they do. So, I think they're hypocritical on that front.
Good point. All right, well, we will have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.